Morning to Texas, Paul. We're behind the scenes. People can still hear us, but we're working it out. I'm going to get you on in just 1 second and doing all that background stuff to get you in there. Thanks for joining me.
No rush, my friend. No rush, my friend.
All right.
I like wood.
I'm telling you straight. It's my way or the highway. So anybody wants to walk, do it now.
I don't read, obviously.
The Burmese executives. So this Burmese, they say, pronounce it Burmese. They don't like the gas. Free healthcare for illegal. Christopher Columbus. When they gaze upon Yosemite.
All right. Let's see. All right, let's just jump straight in because I got a guest waiting in the wings, and I'm looking forward to talking to him this morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's HAL Sparks Mornings, Mega Worldwide. That rustling you hear in the background is our own Texas Paul. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Welcome to the show.
I am wonderful.
Yeah.
Digging through the trash for a list I threw away.
Well, that's a little trick that works for comedians and songwriters and has worked for years for them, and probably in our world where we have insights around the ridiculousness, which I think is somewhere between jazz and poetry sometimes, when we have to deal with the absurdity of even Trump's legal arguments, let's say, and we're going to get into that a little bit this morning, is have little baskets around. Richard Jenny used to actually have trash cans. He had no real trash cans in his house except in the kitchen and the bathroom. Everywhere else, the trash cans were waste paper baskets, and they were just for paper. And he would write jokes on as comedians do, on napkins or whatever he could get his hands on. And the thing was, as soon as you get home, you take them out, you put them in that basket, so you don't wash the jokes. You don't forget them in your jeans or in your jacket. They're always there. And then once a week or once a month or whatever their schedule is, you take all those, you pour them out on a table, and you straighten them out and go, what was I talking about? What was that? What is that note about? What in the hell was I thinking? And then you write your bits based on that. It's pretty fantastic. So, I've got my...
Yeah, I was thinking about you, my friend.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you've been on my mind. Yeah, you've been
Good.
on my mind. I saw your show coming up in Grapevine, and I was thinking, I can't put you in a box, my friend. I can't. And I've finally come up with who you are.
All right.
You, my friend, are Buckaroo Banzai.
I love you, and I want to have your babies. Because that is, for some people in the audience may know, but that is my dream role. I happen to think that Buckaroo Banzai as a series could be America's Doctor Who. And I have been wanting to play that character for a good portion of my life. And man, Oshevitz, that's a wonderful
Well,
thing
think
to
about
say.
it, man.
Yeah.
You're a great entertainer. You're a
It's true.
musician. You're funny.
I'm a martial artist.
You're intelligent.
I have a
You're intelligent?
I have more than a pedestrian understanding of physics, and I have no problem driving a car into the side of a mountain as long as the oscillation overthruster is working properly. Yeah,
And here you are saving the
that's
world.
right. So yes, that's right. We all do our, and with my collection of characters, which I think is kind of the great thing with, you know, a little bit like I guess that would make you the Jeff Goldblum character in this, because he was the one who wore you know, or Rawhide maybe, the other guy. I'm
Now that's
for
a
it.
compliment.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. So, hold on. I'm trying to fix. I don't know why my other loop is, because I have you in my Johnny Million frame, but that's totally fine. I'll fix that. It's just aesthetics on my part. I want to.
No
I
worries.
want to say that you've obviously been. What are you eyeballing story wise right now? Because I think we all have the great thing where diversity is indeed our strength, is that we all prioritize things differently. We all go. Have you guys noticed this one thing? What's Texas Paul kind of like one or two things that you're really keeping an eye on right now that stand out to you story wise that's happening, you know, in our political world?
I just did a take this morning on Ron DeSantis and COVID.
Right?
I am following COVID again. Nobody likes that story. Nobody follows that story.
Sure.
Nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore. I get
Right.
that. But, you know, reality is reality. And you've got Ron DeSantis who's in dirt trouble with his
Yeah.
campaign. I mean, it's just his campaign's just dirting in. So he's going to kill some people.
Right.
That-
He's going to use the nobody they're trying to lock you down again storyline. That I see that all over. Where have I seen it the most? Like Glenn Beck did a whole big thing on it. Obviously, Alex Jones. There's the through line in the right wing dumbass sphere around that. Do you think that's gonna work? I mean, obviously, it's a terrible thing for a governor to do, but when it comes to the messaging of it, do you, you know, maggots are going to maggot, and they're not going to change what they do. You know, there's nothing about any of this that, you know, they're not going to mask up. They're not going to get vaccinated, even if he didn't come up with this, right? Even if he didn't choose to have a, you know, this as a policy in the state. But the messaging on it are they just trying to like breathe some life into an old talking point because they can't bitch about the economy really.
Oh, they're trying to
Right?
stake out their position politically, man. That's
Right.
what they're doing. They're coming out saying, "Oh, them damn Democrats want to lock down again," because you know they spread that fiction that we locked everything down when it was really the one thing
Right.
that the Trump administration really got right in COVID was shutting
Right.
down schools and whatnot. I mean, kudos to him for that, right? I
Right.
mean, you got something right, but what are the dumbasses on the right do? They run away
Right.
from that as fast as they can, and they try to create this fictional narrative that it was Biden that shut everything down. Well, they're going to
Right.
try to run with that stupid fiction again, to stake out the position that, oh, we're for you, because you know that DeSantis is in huge trouble. He needs to revitalize his base, and nothing revitalizes them more than them damn liberals are coming to
Right.
get you, man. They're coming to screw you over. So he's going to
Right.
try to do that and resist anything being done.
Yeah.
Then, when nothing gets done, this same guy that's saying right now, I'm going to protect you from anything getting done, will be screaming, Biden failed. Look at all them people that died this winter from
Right.
COVID.
Right.
He
Right.
didn't do anything.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean,
Well, I mean, this seems to be, we've run into this with Republicans across the board, is that they seem to have an aversion to governing, and yet they have, and yet they also have this sort of intrinsic belief that private business, if just left alone, would solve all these things, as if drug companies would go after, you know, any disease that was affecting less than 0.5% of the population, because, you know, all of the financial trouble you can get in just in drug testing, the backup you need from the government to even go into those reads. That's where the Orphan Drug Act came in. It's where Jack Klugman of Quincy, who I've mentioned on my show many times, people forget, talked Orrin Hatch into co-signing a bill that he was filibustering, so that we would have drugs for things like Tourette's and minor neurological diseases, early autism research. A lot of that was spawned because of drugs that were put into this, because there's just no impetus for it. On the one hand, there's not enough of it for a company that big to make a profit, but there's also a cost in the development and in the insurance possibilities. What happens if it goes awry and in your tests you harm someone? Better to just not touch it in that thing, because the government has to step in. So they believe that private industry is just going to build all the roads, clean up after every hurricane, just out of the goodness of their heart. Otherwise, how their customers get to their stores, right? That stuff never has been true in the history of humanity, but it's all of a sudden magically utopian, going to be true at some point. And yet at the same time,
I tell you,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
Not at all. Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
what's so nefarious and bad about this, though, Hal, is
Mhm.
the reason he's coming out now is because he's been briefed on ARIS, the new variant that's going around. It's
Right.
summertime, Hal. You know how these viruses work. In the
Mhm.
summertime, the reason we have an abatement from these viruses is because they don't live on surfaces well in heat. And we're
Outside.
outside. We go to
Right.
outdoor concerts. We go to,
Right.
we go fishing. We do, we get outside. So we're not just
Yep.
all breathing on each other. The virus is exposed to heat. They don't last as long. ARIS is blowing and going, man, in those conditions. So DeSantis
Right.
got a briefing that said, look, if it's doing it now, if we're seeing,
When,
we got a couple
yeah,
counties in the red here in Texas. If
right.
it's doing it now, schools coming back in and the temperatures are dropping, which
Right.
means the viruses will last on surfaces longer.
And they will
This is
spread.
going to be bad.
Yeah.
You need to prepare as a governor. You need to prepare for this. So what does Ron DeSantis do? He runs out and tries to revive his political campaign
Mhm.
by firing up his base, saying, oh, they're going to try to make you wear masks. Everything that we can possibly do to slow the spread of a virus.
Right.
Immunization, masking up, and distancing. He is already railing against it, knowing that he just got briefed that this winter is going to be bad. That
Right.
it's just, it's sickness, man. It's
I
disease, sickness
don't
of the
get
mind.
I don't get the this affects, and this has been true for the last, since I would guess the first year of COVID. It was pretty much a across the board offender as far as life and long COVID and symptoms and the slowing down of your life for a little while you had it, at best hospitalization and death at worst. It didn't care, seemingly, if you were a Democrat or Republican. Since the vaccines became available, it has distinctly hurt red counties and red districts far worse than it has blue. And the only reason that you can number to number the blue districts versus the red is because of the volume of people. Most blue districts that you talk about where you have something like this, you also have an enormous number of people. So they'll go 5,000 people are sick or have it in New York City or some area like that. A place of 7 to 10 million people, depending on who's coming and going, versus the same number in a state with that, less than that as their population, much less the states themselves, per capita, individuals, which is a ripple across the community. When you have a small town or a medium-sized town, the chance of you knowing somebody who's died of COVID goes up exponentially, because these are the areas where they're like, it's fine, it's all BS. They call, like, they're going to force us to lock down and force us to get the jab, and it's got a chip in it, and the same number of people either in person or through another person, that will say shit like that is the same people that are dying from it. So the same people who say that stuff or talk around that stuff or know somebody who talks like that also more than likely know someone personally who has died from COVID recently. It's a hell of a get out the vote campaign. No, I don't. Yeah, they do care. I will say they do care about another boogeyman. They fear this fantasy UN shock troop, George Soros Marxist, flat earth troops that make us all stop at the ice ring around the edge of the earth, whatever their current fantasy is. They care more about that than obvious measurable reality. They do care.
They will let 10 more of their friends
right.
die to
Right.
own us libs. They will.
But
that cult is that deep.
right. But I think that owning of the libs thing has to be. I mean, yes, there are people online, and I have a hard time kind of like weeding through who's real and who's not, especially on shitter right now on Twitter. At this point, I'm assuming 80% bots at this point if I ever go on there, right? But but in terms of real people, to talk someone out of vaccines and to talk someone, which is a very normal aspect of modern life and has been for a very long time and has saved a myriad of lives, and our population has increased measurably and obviously since we started introducing vaccines that extend life and extend health for everyone involved. And they'll use any situation will have contraindications. Any drug has contraindications, and like they're fine with Trump snorting Adderall no matter what the he's using it off label and doesn't have a prescription, and he's using it wrong by snorting it, and I suppose one of the side effects is it makes you a bigot and a racist, or it exacerbates your bigoted and racist ideas because it creates hyperfocus in people that don't have ADHD. And they'll do that. That's a pharmacy drug. That's big pharma. That's fine. These assholes will crush up OxyContin and snort it while saying "Yeehaw Trump."
Deaf, yeah.
Right. That they've gotten, and they're like, the big pharma's trying to kill us all. Snort. It's amazing to me that the cognitive dissonance that you're dealing with, but part of it might just be macho bullshit, but some of it, especially because if you look at Republican women, although some of them, I would argue, engage in macho bullshit, it seems like they have a big boogeyman, whether it's immigrants or leftover Islam fear that's just kind of threaded through stuff since 9/11, or just straight up Illuminati stuff, or they dove into the Q thing and they actually, even if they've left most of it behind, still kind of go, well, I really do think Roseanne still thinks that there's a cabal of people that runs the earth that have started eating the livers of African children because they don't use Roundup and they're purer in Africa and the livers from the children taste sweet. She said that out loud. Like, that's a boogeyman. That is, obviously to follow Trump at this point, you'd have to believe something that nuts. Right?
Well, it goes back to that psychological aspect that people have. They've proven over and over again in study after study, people would rather endure great physical pain or even death, up to death, before they will say the words, "I was wrong."
Right.
People, once they've got them in this stuff, and especially when it comes from us, when we say, "You're a moron and I can prove it," they're like, "You're telling me I'm wrong." And no, and they will dig deeper down that rabbit hole just to protect themselves. It's really something else. The other thing I'm covering right now is the Ken Paxton impeachment down here.
Sure.
I got to tell you, folks, go to the Texas Tribune. They are great journalism. When you get, after the show, when you get some time, they're covering the trial live. We have to get people watching this because there are 6. We need 21 to convict. There are 6 that I call the 6-6, and I've got a list of their names here for you. It's Lois Colcourse in the 18th District, Bob Hall in the 2nd District, Paul Betancourt in the 7th District, Brandon Creighton in the 4th District, Tan Parker in the 12th District, and Donna Campbell in the 25th District are the 6-6. They voted with Paxton through every amendment he put forward, and they're going to vote no matter what happens. Ken Paxton could murder somebody in the middle of the floor of this impeachment. They would still vote no. The thing is, we've got 4 more that are waffling. They're on the fence.
Right.
It's Charles Perry, Kevin Sparks, Charles Perry, the 28th District, Kevin Sparks of the 31st, Charles Schwertner in the 5th District, and Brian Birdwell in the 22nd District. What they're doing is they're gauging the audience. How many people are paying attention? Who's paying attention to what's going on? How much is this going to cost me in the future? That's the calculus. Not as they know he's guilty. They know he's good. Jeff Mateer, Ken Paxton's second in command, took the stand yesterday. When he was done testifying, you could hear meekly from the Paxton camp, "You sunk my battleship."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was bad, man. Because Jeff Mateer is their guy. He's an evangelical. He's a true believer. There's no wall between church and government. He was super celebrated here in Texas by the right wing and the evangelicals when he was appointed. He took Chip Roy's old job as Ken Paxton's lieutenant.
Lieutenant. Yeah, assistant attorney general or whatever it was. Right.
And you know, he was their guy, and he just sat up there and said, "Look, we have no reason, no understanding why Ken Paxton was trying to get our office to act on behalf of Nate Paul. He's a Donald Trump. He inflates the values of his properties. He's you know, lost several to foreclosure now. He is Donald Trump. Imagine the way Donald Trump runs his empire. That was Nate Paul in Austin, and you know, you had
it's like the Christie knows
just
best
Cliff's
guy.
Notes.
It's not that uncommon a thing. It seems to be, you know, we're getting to the point where Donald Trump's complaints about him being charged because he knows dozens of people who do this shit all the time and get away with it, and that's what he seems to be mad about sometimes. Is like the guy who ran BP, who had that, you know, he had that statement where he's like, I just want my life back. I want to go back to where after the big oil spill, and shrugging it off like, how dare he say that? Well, it's because the guys at Exxon had been dumping the exact same amount of oil into the Congo every year for decades. So to him, it's like, this is just one spill. This is nothing. These guys over here are dumping constantly, and they don't have any of these problems. Like, that's the kind of just like blank, like distance from reality that these guys have, that they just can't, there is no touchstone of genuineness in this. And so explain, like, if you can, in a nutshell, for people who are just following this, the case against Ken Paxton and sort of the genesis of it becoming an actual impeachment.
Nate Paul was a big contributor.
Yeah.
So he was doing favors because he was getting money and help and renovations in his house and all kinds of no-nos. But Ken Paxton was having an affair with a woman down in San Antonio. He didn't like Ubering down to San Antonio because Ken Paxton's office is in Austin. 35 is a mess. It's an hour and a half each way. He didn't like that. So Nate Paul gave Ken Paxton's mistress a job in Austin so Ken Paxton could get his freak on locally. But Ken Paxton tried to use his office to assist, and this is where Mateer got him yesterday so badly. The entire office after COVID was just fighting everything. We're open for business. We're open for business. And then all of a sudden, Ken Paxton walks in with this request. I need you to write an opinion that because of COVID, we can't have foreclosures, you know, because COVID's just shutting everything. We can't do that. And Mateer's like, that's 100% the opposite of everything we believe in and what this office is arguing.
Right.
Why are you asking me to now do this? And then it's okay. Oh, it's Nate Paul's properties that are being foreclosed on. And then he's like, well, why are you doing this? Then he hires, get this, man, he hires a guy by the name of Brandon Comack. Brandon Comack runs around and says, I'm the special prosecutor for the state of Texas. No, he wasn't. He was an outside counsel that was hired by Ken Paxton. This guy went to a judge and got subpoenas that were written. They were written by Ken Paxton to help Nate Paul attack the FBI, because now Nate Paul's been indicted by the FBI on 8 counts. He went and got subpoenas from a judge, said, hey, I'm a special prosecutor. I need you to issue these subpoenas. 3 weeks later, Mateer finds out that Brandon Comack's been hired, has to go back to the judge and tell the judge, this guy has no authority to request subpoenas. You need to take every one of those subpoenas back. And Ken Paxton lost his frickin', he called Mateer drunk, you know, just raging about the fact that he's interfering with his guy Comack that's out there acting as Nate Paul's advocate using state resources and the office and the collar of the district attorney of the state of Texas to help out his buddy. It's a mess, folks. It's a mess. But you got to watch, because I tell you, these four guys aren't going to vote. They're Republicans. Right or wrong doesn't mean crap to these guys.
Yeah.
They're going to vote whether you're watching, and they're going to pay a price. That's it.
Can I just say for it, and thank you for your concise telling of that. But that's a wonderfully 30s style American political scandal. On a scale that I think people can wrap their head around, which may help a lot of people go like, yeah, he's guilty. This is just trash. This is like when the mayor's caught, sleeping with the sheriff's wife and fires the guy when he's in the middle of the investigation into the fact that he owns a bunch of houses on a row through a shell company. Like that's like that. Most of us, that's the kind of thing that ends up being like a cute true crime documentary at the very least, and it's easy for people to grasp. And interestingly enough, has a lot of parallels to Donald Trump, in that Donald Trump's, in telling the IRS his properties aren't worth shit and they're losing money all the time, and then telling the banks that they're worth more than double because of his name and because of the properties themselves, and what you're gonna be able to sell them for is what they're worth today, which is fucking bananas. That argument, when he made that the other day, I was like, this is kind of the dumbest thing I've ever heard him say in public, and that's saying a lot. And for people that weren't following along, he was making the case that it was okay for him to say a property that's worth $300,000, let's say, is worth $1 million on April 1st of this year, because 5 years from now, if the market continues to just grow on an index level, you'll be able to sell it for $1 million in theory. Therefore, you can price it at $1 million today. I want to borrow against what it's gonna earn after I sell it, which is just like, who are you? Get out of my office if you're at a bank, right? Like, how do you even? It's bizarre. But that case in itself, I think it's easy for people to grasp in that regard. So people need to watch it. I'm going to post, by the way, the Texas Tribune site in the chat room so people can grab
they're great.
that.
They're not left. They're not left.
Yeah.
They're not right. They're just news, man.
Right.
And on the left, that's all we need, because we tell the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, but they're really great.
Well, that's that liberal bias
this is
that
gonna
the
make
news
you laugh,
has.
man.
Right?
You know Gibson Dunn, right? The law firm, massive law firm, right?
Yeah.
This is how stupid Nate Paul and Ken Paxton are. Nate Paul skips out on all the fees that he was supposed to pay Gibson Dunn for setting up shell companies. This guy set up hundreds of shell companies. He moved like $87 million out of accounts in his company to hide his assets to family members and whatnot. Then he skips out on the bill.
Oh, you don't.
And Gibson Dunn is like, the money went here, and the money went here,
Right.
and the money went here.
Right.
And this brother and this cousin and this nephew have money in these accounts. And like, how stupid can you be, man? My God.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in that particular case, unlike, say, a criminal case, because you're setting up companies, there are all sorts of aspects of the company finances and stuff like that that have to be public, that can be, but are optionally public in that regard, that you don't have to release them, but you can also insist on a subpoena, or you can volunteer it. There's a lot more wiggle room. This is not like somebody's paperwork when they're, engaged in any kind of major litigation. And so it'd be that you're right. That is the single dumbest area to not pay your lawyer if you're hiding stuff behind walls that are on wheels. You just
Look, folks, just a little PSA, man, and Hal will back me up on this. If you have an if you pay them, they have to keep your secrets forever.
Yeah.
Forever. But if you don't pay them, they can take your secrets and take them to a judge and say, we did this for them, And it's now public record, a matter of court record,
Yeah.
all the crap you asked them to do for you,
Right.
because you didn't pay your bill.
Right. Because it used to, and there's, I think in the RICO statutes, and this might be, we'll have to look it up in the Georgia law, but it's more than likely it's this way in the Georgia law, but in the federal one, we'll see, because it's certainly a stronger law in Georgia, is that there used to be this like $1 retainer idea, that all I have to do is retain you for whatever price we agree is the retainer, and then anything I spill to you, you can't talk about. Whether I continue to have you as my lawyer or not, whether I release you from it, and it became this like holding spot for locking up any kind of, if you had co-defendants in a case, in a RICO statute, for the example, you hire this lawyer and then you spill your shit to this lawyer after giving them $1 retainer, but then never actually hire them, or indeed don't pay them, which is the Trump methodology and this guy's methodology as well. And they're supposed to just keep their fucking trap shut and act as your lawyer, even though you did not live up to your end of the bargain in this. I find that just like fascinating that Trump still believes that's how it works. Probably because that's how Rudy Giuliani does work. Rudy Giuliani's one of those assholes like, get $1 out of your wallet. Why? Just put it on the desk. Why? Just tell me you're retaining me as your lawyer and I'll take the $1 off the desk and we can start talking. And then we can crime all we want and nobody can touch us. That is clearly how Rudy Giuliani thinks shit works. And I guess maybe Paxton thought that was the system as well. Thank God again that these people are so stupid, that their criming is so ridiculously, there's an arrogance to it, I think, because, which I always thought was mixed with this idea, this mythology they had about Obama, which is like Obama's just shoving this stuff down our throat. So with that came this illusion that if we're in power like that, we can just shove this stuff down people's throat because nobody's stopping him. Well, they're not stopping him because A, he's not shoving it down your throat. They moved it through Congress like every fucking other thing. Shit was cut out of it. There was more they wanted and they didn't get all of it. And it was a legislative process. But it happened in less than 10 years. So suddenly that's like shocking to everybody that something would actually pass in a reasonable period of time. That was the shoving down the throat part. But Trump seems to think that when he got into office, he could act like he thought Obama acted, which is he's acting like a king. That's what everybody tells me. He just roll up in here and sign away all the shit he wants. And so they have this idea that there's a kiss my ass card that everybody gets once they're in government, that they could just crime their way out, and then if anybody comes to them, they go, I'm the AG, fuck off. And that clearly, at a certain point, seemed like Paxton think either that he could do that directly and overtly, or covertly, nobody would bother him because how dare you, right? How dare you?
Yeah,
like
that's exactly it. That's what I said. My last show on Wednesday is this guy thinks he's Superman. He thinks he's Superman. He's gotten away with this crap forever in the state. He's been able to bulldoze and bully people because he's the DA, and he's gotten away with it. So he thinks he's going to get away with it. So I'm asking you folks, if we don't get this into the national media, if we don't get attention on this, I guarantee you these 4 sleazebag Republicans will vote to acquit this guy. And if they get all 4, Paxton walks. He's our DA again.
Right.
So
pay
attention.
Yeah. And I mean, he still can be tried in a court of law. Then it becomes a federal case. And then then they turn it into the feds are trying to tell us how to run our state bullshit, which is kind of how they like to operate.
Well, he's going to, because Nate Paul being indicted. I mean, this just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
We got his fresh mugshot. He looks like just hammered to hell in his mugshot. This guy's been like a 30-year-old wonder kid driving around Austin in a Bentley.
Right.
All the pictures. Hell, Forbes even did a spread on him.
Right.
And boy, his mugshot really, that's a fallen angel right there, boy.
Right.
I tell you, he's got gray coming out everywhere, whiskers. He looks tireder than I do. He's all,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he's going the other direction. like some people are saying smile and try to look good in it, so it looks like somebody cut and paste your headshot into one and are just messing with you, and you can tell people that 10 years from now if they have short memories. And the other thing is look so bagged out Nick Nolte style that people can't believe that's actually a picture of you. They're like, that's just some homeless dude who looks like Nick Nolte, right?
That was the worst mugshot in history. My God.
Well, wasn't that around the time he was in Down and Out in Beverly Hills? And he was literally like, dude, you don't do method acting in a light comedy. Stop it.
That was a great movie, though. I love
that
movie.
He's terrific in it. And I think
I love Richard Dreyfuss, too. I love Richard Dreyfuss, too. That's right.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite characters. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of 48 Hours for a lot of reasons. And his character in that and his just absolute, just over it aspect, like, his energy in that is so fucking fantastic. I just love that movie. Anyways, we'll get off into another tangent. I will say, and chat room, if you guys have any questions for Texas Paul, feel free to like make a note in there of something you want to relate to. The other thing is, again, yes, Eris and COVID, and especially in red districts like where Texas Paul is going to have a bigger effect because a lot of people around your area are not going to mask up when they're not feeling well, or if they have comorbidities or any of that stuff, because it's become a political thing. And I have my own theory about the lab leak bioweapon theory on the right that has come out, where China attacked us with a bioweapon. That's what the lab leak means to them, is that the leak part is like a wink, right? They didn't really leak it. They let it out that, like RFK Jr., the Ashkenazi Jews and the Chinese got together to kill everybody, right? That was
awful. That was awful.
Jesus, I don't know what the fuck.
That tape was awful.
And his defense of it and his defensiveness about it, I think, interestingly enough, torpedoed. If you'll notice, he was Vivek Ramaswamy has been has eaten all the the spots on podcasts and news that RFK was getting is now Ramaswamy's territory. Like, RFK has been broomed, and that had a lot to do with it. But the idea about the lab leak not being a real leak and it was on purpose and blah, blah, blah. And never mind the fact that, again, if that was true, Donald Trump was president during the worst bioweapon attack on the United States, and he called the person who did it a genius and a professional and sold him a bunch of pork, soybeans and corn and beef, which is, I mean, again, apologies to Chamberlain if that's now the new standard. But right,
that is great. That is a great comparison.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are people bitching about with that? The dude literally he can't stop complimenting the guy who he apparently, and his followers, think attacked us with a bioweapon. But
so where are you on the whole lab leak? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
For interrupting.
No.
I
think more than likely. Well, first of all, Donald Trump, the Obama administration stopped gain of function research when they were in office. And Donald Trump turned it back on. Donald Trump and his administration said you can continue gain of function research. They allowed that to continue. And then they cut funding to the Wuhan lab at one point, money that was going there. Not money for the gain of function research, but money for security at that lab. And voila, a supposedly, possibly gain of function linked version of the virus gets out and ends up in a wet market and gets to everybody. Now, there are a myriad of ways this could have happened, but I'll tell you, as somebody who spent a lot of time in China, that beyond something nefarious, the most obvious thing is that there is someone who possibly worked at that lab who, when these animals die, went, people will buy these. And the level of kind of low-level corruption there, where people just buy dead animals and sell them for meat or for any of the other, Chinese medicine use and all that kind of stuff. And they're pretty rare, a lot of these animals. So it's easier to just pay some dude to let you run off with the bats, run off with the penguins, whatever they have there. More than likely, that's how it happened. That these things died in the process, and this buddy sells it to his this guy sells it to his buddy, and that guy sells it at the wet market.
Well, they had a couple guys that ended up in the hospital that worked in the lab also. And I thought, I told people from the beginning, yeah, it's a lab leak. I did.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's a lab leak, and they've proven that the original virus, because they can trace it back through its RNA, that it came back from a cluster of bats that are about an hour outside Wuhan. And I'm like, yeah, we want these people studying this zoonotic disease. Every freaking doctor and scientist on Earth is 100% lockstep in agreement that zoonotic diseases
must be
are
studied.
what's going to get us. That's what's going to get us. You know what I mean? That's going to be the big die off on Earth, is that these viruses are mutating out in on their own. We need to study them. And I don't know. I thought a couple of guys got sick, went to the hospital.
Yeah.
China being China doesn't like to cop up to things, lied about it and said, oh, no, that didn't happen.
Right.
And because, they don't want any liability or anything.
That's you're exactly right. And by the way, the question of whether it was somebody who got it from the wet market or somebody who brought it to the wet market, because the very guy I'm talking about could have caught it from that guy, taken it himself. It might not have been part of the animals, but the fact that he interacted with the place all the time, he carried it personally there. Entirely possible. But the point being is that, again, Trump ramped up the gain of function again, cut off security funding, which is exactly the kind of thing that would allow a leak like this to happen, or just, the people who should be, the materials they would need to make these labs safe and stuff. They would have less of them. The door locks would be, wanting. The people around, guards and stuff would be on half shifts. Stuff like that, which is exactly what you don't want. And again, this is like when they talk about the Ukrainian biolabs. I'm like, you do realize they supply so much wheat to the world that if that wheat has a blight and is wiped out, you'll lose 500 million people in a short order because that food is wiped out. So they have to
That's what I kept arguing to people. Every major university system in the world, everyone in Ukraine, Germany, France, everywhere, has labs studying zoonotic diseases.
Because they're localized to that area.
And and you want that. You want that. I mean, because
and you want them studied there instead of like, can you imagine if America was only place doing this and we had to get permission from the Chinese government to go pick up, to fly in every possible pathogen. Get out. I mean, it's the horror movies write themselves in that instance. But in this particular case, like the argument from the right that, they're going to control us with this, that this was a point of control, that this was the government. They used COVID as a fake out. And this goes back to your DeSantis issue. They used COVID as a fake out to fix the election and to control us. Well, first of all, it didn't work because more people voted and in the recounts, the only people they found double voting or voting using someone else's ballot were maggots who were doing the guy who killed his wife and hid her body and voted for her, the people in the villages who Donald Trump said vote twice because they're probably tearing up your ballot. And then and so they did, and then he tells all these stories of the people. I showed up and they said I had already voted, and I was just and did you go to the cops? Did you file a lawsuit? Your vote was stolen. Go file a lawsuit. No one will stop you. The fuck are you talking about? Do it. None of them do. I don't know why. I would. If you showed up, seriously, if you showed up and said, you've already voted, you're like, no. Calling a police officer right now. I want him to hear you say that, and then I'm filing an injunction right now. I want to vote with a provisional ballot right now so my vote gets counted. I don't know what the fuck that other vote says. I didn't send it in. Somebody's fucking around. And there's a case here. Every Democrat I know would do that on the spot. Republicans didn't because they're like, oh, fuck, they got my other vote already. I don't know who did this. Bye. Where that. So it's
the Karen colony would just take that.
And go home. I that part boggled my mind. But it was this whole idea of they just want to control you. This is all about control. They're trying to control the public. They're trying to box us all in. And it's sort of in line with that idea that like public schools turn out drones, people who can't think critically. And by the way, all said by people who went to public school. So I don't know what the fuck, why are they magic, right?
While Alex they Jones try to make public schools places that only produce drones by taking, prisons have libraries, but Texas high schools have detention centers in their libraries. So
right.
What used to be libraries.
Right. So that part is that fear of control and yet that desire for it is the weird mismatch that I'm having to deal with right now in the messaging around both Ron DeSantis and the the lockdowns are coming. They want you to mask up again, which is just like, there's a new variant. You should probably get a booster. If you don't get a booster, at least pay attention to your symptoms so you don't give it to somebody who hasn't had a chance to get a booster yet. Be a sensible human being. It's like it's faded from the Patriot Act into, if you see something, say something. And yet these motherfuckers are still like trying to drive mosques out of their town like it was 9/12. And
Yeah. That's why I say
amazing.
DeSantis is talking about the GS2 variant, gas stoves too.
Right. They're ceiling fans.
They're coming for your gas stoves,
right,
with the mask.
And you know what I'm fascinated by is those storylines. I mean, of course, nobody pushes back on that. They just they just get outraged. They just get like, oh my God, they're coming for the gas. Can you believe this? I don't what's next. That's all they say. Is anybody sitting there other than the girl, I'm blitzing on her name, who's on the 5 sometimes, who's terrific, Jessica, who like, does anybody go, yeah, you know why the gas stove thing is that they want to limit that is because when you grow up in a household with a gas stove, if you don't have proper ventilation in that house, people develop asthma in those households at a faster clip than anywhere else. And the rules about, signing off by choice or having new stuff built, gas versus electric, has to do with like apartment buildings. So when people are building large developments where people in low income live, if you have the standard as gas versus the standard as electric, you can get a special sign off. You go, I don't give a fuck, and you can sign up a thing and get a gas stove. Not a problem.
But they put electric in all of them anyways, yeah.
Right. But in rentals, if they were using gas, you have poor kids growing up with more asthma, with health problems from the asthma, and more insurance costs, more healthcare, Medicare costs later in life, more Social Security costs later in life. And you're like, well, in these kind of projects, we'll just make it the baseline standard electric stoves, unless someone seeks a special dispensation and gets it. And in which case they have to have better ventilation. That's it. Like, and the fact that that's just adult talk. And
HAL.
Yeah.
My house. I built my own house. Okay.
Yeah.
I contracted my own house.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is an upside down beer cooler. I have the most efficient house you can imagine, man. I'm telling you, I've got almost right at 4,000 square feet, and my electric bills are like $130 a month.
Wow.
I mean, it's super efficient house, man.
Yeah.
It does not breathe at all.
Right.
Okay. My parents' house, their house wasn't wrapped. They didn't have foam in the walls. They didn't have foam in the attic. They had, insulation that just had been blown in, and and an opening on the side of their
pink shit with the Pink Panther drawn on it. Right.
Yeah. And a big opening in the side of the attic to allow air in and out and all that. That was my parents. The wind would blow and you could feel it in the house.
Right.
My house, a bomb can go off 10 feet from my house and I can't even hear it, much less feel it.
Right.
I mean, so yeah, they're saying, okay, our houses are tighter now. Mm-hmm. Construction techniques are better. They're more efficient. Everything that we're doing to build these houses to make them more efficient makes them breathe less, which creates sick houses.
Right.
If you don't exchange the air, you're going to end up with mold. You're going to end up with problems. And if you have an open flame from a gas cooktop, which isn't a candle, folks. I mean, my power boil setting on my GE cooktop goes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's almost like a welding torch. Right.
Yeah. They're like, ventilate your house. That's all they said. That was the entire recommendation. Ventilate your house if you're going to use a gas stove.
Right.
And then, here comes Turd Cruz and, Dumb Santis. They're going to take your gas stove. Well, you know what? I haven't died from my vaccines. My gas stove is still in my kitchen. I'm still smoking briskets, man. I mean,
I know. I cooked myself a steak last night. There were no progressive police outside trying to lower my meat intake on my carnivore diet that I've been on for 9 months now. Jesus, which was supposed to be a 10 day to 14 day experiment, and now it just is ongoing. Yeah, it's strange. But yeah,
And may I
none of that has
say,
happened.
you look amazing, sir.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's I got to say, like, it works. I can't argue. I did not change my workout thing at all, and my body just went from like pretty good to like Troy, like that. Like it shrink wrapped me. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I recommend it. You don't have to do it all the time. You can do a period of it. If for anybody that eats any meat at all, you can do a period of it, and it will you'll definitely see a shift. You can go right back to eating normal if you want. Hashtag normal. But anyways, that's just a conversation for another time when I'm down in Texas and
Yeah.
we're eating brisket together. But interesting. All the things, all the fear mongering, all of it is just falling apart before our eyes, and it shows in I'm sure you see in
Oh, yeah.
how they react to Ken Paxton thing, which is, like I said, is a very normal corruption scandal. Very easy to wrap your head around. It's not even that weird. It's not they're thinly threading this law to go after this guy but it's not even it's clear and obvious good old fashioned Chicago style corruption. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
almost like the stuff from a
Okay, now
detective
you went too
novel or
far
Dragon.
there. Don't be calling us Chicago down here.
All right. All right. Well, yeah, in all fairness, you have far more guns
I
than
love
we do.
Chicago, by the way. I
do
love
too.
Chicago, by the way.
Me too. It is my favorite city on the planet. But yeah, so we've already got that prescription. I put the link in the chat as well, and I will also put it in the video afterwards when we put this as part of the HAL SPARKS podcast, Mega Worldwide. I'll put that link in there for the Ken Paxton thing so people can hop over there and watch that trial. And annoyingly, if you're on Shitter or Threads or Instagram or wherever you go, where you can find any of these fools, go. You're really buying what this guy's selling. That in and of itself will be enough. You can do things like that especially if you're a Texan. But if you're outside there, you're going, really, this is what passes for justice in Texas? You guys are just going to let this slide? And that will those four that you say are on the fence more than likely react to at least that kind of external pressure. One would hope. The other thing is, and again, pay attention to COVID. If you have comorbidities or you have any of the issues, get a booster when it's available. I think it comes out in 2 weeks, right? Are you frozen? You're with me still, right? You're good. There you are. Did your video freeze? It did, didn't it? That's weird. Is it a heat thing? Hold on.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I froze up,
yeah.
man.
Yeah. Okay. I heard you. Yeah. You're. Oh, there you go. Now you're moving again. We'll get him back. I had to go flip the switch on Paul. It's a good shot though. As I have to say, you have the best freezes of anyone. That's solid. A lot of people, we would all catch one where we're like in mid sneeze, and this was kind of gelatinous. Oh, he's coming and going. It's an internet issue on his side. All right, he might pop back up. Either way, though, I'm getting to the end of the hour, so the timing is kind of perfect. We got 5 more minutes with him if he wants to pop back in. Feel free, Texas Paul, to hop back in if you want. Let's see. Then there, Judas reborn as only love, President conscience, man. I need Texas Paul's health secret too. I think it's a good nature. Is how you do it. That's how
Back up and running. Sorry
there
about
you
that.
Are. That's okay.
It was me. It was mine. I don't know what the hell happened. My internet connection died.
It's Texas, man. They got that kickstart coal fired internet down there to try and be all macho.
We just got a grid. Speaking of that, we just got another damn grid notice that we've got to. They wanted me to turn my air conditioning up to 80 freaking degrees. I'm not kidding. Yeah, like that. That's gonna happen.
Right?
No.
Well, and your house in particular would you turn it up to 80 and it'd probably reach 80 somewhere around like October, November, right? Because of the seal on it. Just don't open the door. So where we were, though, was that people paying attention to COVID eras, which is one of the things you wanted to bring up. And then, of course, the Paxton trial, which, again, I put that link in and I will put in again in the podcast version of the show. Where's the best place for people to watch your stuff? Is it your YouTube channel as far as, you have your own URL, something we can start pitching out? If you don't, can I help you get one?
Yeah, I know.
The
I'm. Forgive me. I'm locking up. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but
Yep, we hear you.
realtexaspaul.com is a link to my YouTube channel.
Great.
Take you right to it. Take you all onto all my social media. Take you to my YouTube channel. Sorry about this. I don't know what's going on, man. Everything's
okay, it
going
happens.
good, but all my sources are dying.
That happens.
Texas,
Dude, I go through it all the time. It could just be the heat. It's all right. RealTexasPaul.com will take you to all his social medias sites, and will also help you go straight to his YouTube channel, where you should subscribe and support him. Do you have a Patreon that we can let people know about? Do you do Patreon?
I do not do Patreon. I don't do that because I'm here to get a message out, and I figure charging tiers for people to get the message, hell, man, I just want people watching. That's all.
Right.
You know.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
why I don't
just
hide
listen to
anything
what I
behind
got to say.
I don't have a firewall, or a paywall that I put stuff behind, but people can contribute at higher levels if they just want to help the message move out faster. That's all. So but I hear you, and that's exactly why I don't, other than like stand-up shows, I don't put any of the political stuff that we're talking about, because again, a lot of this stuff is timely. A lot of, you want it to spread to as many people as possible. You're pushing back against a broad row of topics that happen all the time. So, I agree. I don't understand the, like TYT and all these other places. They have this weird paywall thing where you can watch half the show. Well, look, if it means something to you, if it's meaningful, it's meaningful. If people need to hear it, if the message is important and you're saving lives and changing minds and all that stuff, do it out in the open. So I appreciate that. That's a great thing. So realtexaspaul.com, check that out. And thank you, sir, so much for coming on, and we'll have you on again
Always
real
a
soon.
pleasure to be with you, Hal. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really nice to do a show with somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about, that's intelligent, that you can have a conversation with, and you never say stupid shit, Hal. It's great, man. It's freaking great.
Well, it's not that I'm not trying. Sometimes I intentionally try to say some stupid shit. There is no Hunter Biden laptop started as a dare. It just turned out to be smart and true. But yeah, that's how it works out. Appreciate, and same right back at you. And I appreciate you. And I think I'm glad everybody, in both our directions can share audience and get to know each other, because this is all democracy is a like-minded effort. Diversity is definitely our strength in terms of our life experience, but we all do come together under the umbrella of democracy and constitutional government. And there's only one way we show it in this country, and that's to show up to vote. And I don't care how many fucking Trump flags you have on the back of your truck, you still only get one vote. And you're an equal of every other person in this country in that way. And it's one of the greatest things about this country. So if you let it slide, or you don't use it, any of the failings are on you. And so Texas Paul and I will be after everybody to vote and show up for primaries and special elections and midterms, because they all matter. So thanks so much, brother. I appreciate it.
Always good to be here, man.
Yeah, thanks a bunch. All right, I'm going to let you go so I can bring in Aaron Parnas when he shows up. Thank you so much, my friend. We'll see you again soon. And let's see. So yeah, I think Aaron's going to be joining in just a minute. And it's good because I can get the screen ready for him in a second. Actually, what I can do is say hi to the chat room. How are you, lovely people up there? That's lovely. How you talk amongst yourselves while I wait for him to pop in. Hopefully, he has all the info, and we'll be just fine. Let's go. Aaron. For those of you who don't know, Aaron Parnas is a Dem activist, but he's also the son of Lev Parnas, who did time for hanging out with Rudy Giuliani and his crowd. And it's I have so many questions, and it's for him especially. That I don't want it to be about, all about his dad or whatever, but the experience, because they're Ukrainian, How'd you see the Twitter feud with Ann Coulter and Trump? Yes. I mean, they have one all the time. She hates his guts, and she's not wrong for doing it. It's her broken clock moment. She just wants the dude to like go away. And largely because he wasn't awful enough at the border. So, okay. And as I wait for him, I will check in with you guys. I believe Aaron has congressional aspirations. Can you ask him about that? Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's see. And yeah. Let's see. Okay. I've made a nameplate for him so he can show up. It'll be fantastic. Put that down there, and then I'll move Texas Paul's, who was great. It's so funny because I'm just now getting to the point where we're having regular guests on here, and to be completely frank, I password check staff. Okay, beg your pardon. The password it's the same as whatever. He can cut and paste that one. Give me 1 second. Need password one. Oh, I see. It's that. It should work. It has not changed, so it will work. If you cut and paste and give him that one, it's an O, not a 0. That might help, and all caps on that one. That should do just fine. So So he's waiting in the wings. We're good. He will get in here. No stress, no mess, no muss. And second now, it's just it takes a moment to yes, open the pod bay door, Hal. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, you mean the woman who wrote "In Trump We Trust"? Yeah, her. You read Elon shut off internet access to Ukraine during a battle? That's why they're getting the Swedish system. That they made a contract. I think it was Sweden, to use their spot satellite system, because he's untrustworthy. And the problem with him is that that he might, they might strategically have problems at the wrong time. Okay, that's the scary thing about using his his system, is that can you really trust him, and will he just at certain times put his thumb on the scale and wreck the whole? There he is. There's Aaron. I'll bring him in a second. Hi, Aaron. Let me copy the link and I'll pop you in and you can join us. Very excited to have you with us today. It's very cool. Hold on 1 second. I'll pop that in there and paste that in there. And as soon as he pops up, I'll bring him over. There we go. And there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Parnas, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can hear okay, everything's good, all that. We'll get that out of the way. Excellent. So, we were just, I mean, there's so much to talk about with you on a bunch of fronts. And I know I think your dad has started doing videos for Midas Touch, and he's writing a book currently about his experience in Trump land, or in the Trump cult, or in the the Giuliani world. I don't know how much overlap there was in that stuff, but your family's Ukrainian, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so, my dear friend Philip Bittner, and who's my regular guest on here, comes on Wednesdays and kind of gives us an update. He's there now. He's been in Odessa the last week. He's in Kiev most of the time. He's been to the front a couple of times. And we're pretty well versed in this, with our chat and about the ongoing fight. I just want to know, as somebody just on a personal note, with family from there and a history of family from there, how you're taking it, how your experience has been as it's happening. You live in the United States currently. I'm like, you're here
I
now.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was born and raised here in the States.
Yeah.
I think for anyone, and I saw family over there, I think for anyone who either has family from there or family currently there, I think it's been a very difficult, now almost year and a half. It's been, the first month or two was especially difficult. I mean, I had a little cousin there who was sleeping under mattresses while bombs rained overhead. And I think a lot of folks here in the States, it's very easy to get war fatigue, is what I call it. Everyone was kind of focused. Everyone became a Ukrainian war expert the first month of the war, and then it didn't go away, but people stopped talking about it. And I think that a lot of folks don't realize that there is still people are dying every day.
Yeah.
Literally the other day, yesterday, or the day before, there was a strike on a market in eastern Ukraine. 16 individuals were killed, including a child. So it's very difficult, and it's especially difficult seeing how here in the States, those who initially potentially supported helping Ukraine, supported efforts to fight for democracy and fight for their freedom, really don't anymore. So the change in sentiment has also been very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about that market strike recently, and we're like I said, we've been following kind of even the minutia of the movements on the front lines there, as well as, and what Philip does, which is great for us, which is give the kind of personal and historic aspect of how people are feeling and living in the country while this is an ongoing thing. And it's not that different, I would say, from how the British or the French or the Poles dealt with World War II, where there was a front on half their country and then people trying to keep producing food on a farm in the other half of the country. It's an incredible struggle. There's a constant trauma just to the experience. But on top of that, this fight for any sense of normalcy in it. Our politics around, Donald Trump and his belief that it never would have happened if, which is garbage. I mean, obviously, in the same way that he thinks, China wouldn't be threatening about Taiwan. China was threatening about Taiwan the entire time he was in office and years before. That's been part of their argument forever. And after Chechnya and Georgia, and then the 2014 attack on Ukraine, there's no sense that Russia will ever stop this unless they are made to stop. Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I actually, out of all the things Donald Trump said, he is right. I don't think Vladimir Putin would have had to invade if he was president. Why? Because Vladimir Putin wouldn't need to. Trump would have just given Ukraine over,
right,
just like he did with Crimea. An invasion wouldn't have needed to happen. Trump would just say, "Okay, Crimea is Russia. Great, move on," like he did.
Yeah. And then
Donetsk is Russia. Just move on.
Yeah. Well, they would have, recognized the Donetsk and Luhansk republics, and then called it a day. He would have signed off on it before anybody else. And
100%.
NATO and the EU would have been up in arms about it, and he would go, "I'm owning those libs," or something about it. You're absolutely right. I do think they were attempting the slow roll version of it pre the Euromaidan. And so and I don't know your history in terms of this, and I know your democracy is a key aspect of why I do the show, and I think one of the things that makes you an activist is like the value of it, and you cannot let it slip away, and that it is delicate, and that destroying it doesn't take a lot of work ultimately, because we saw that in Ukraine, the illusion of democracy for a very long time under Petro Poroshenko, or even under Yanukovych, which was an extreme version of just Russian puppeteering, and all this stuff about the Shokin firing and all this that they're trying to gin up in this time when Ukraine was far more corrupt than it is now. And the point was to move from where it was to where it is and where it's ultimately going. And it's very strange from my perspective. I'm curious how you take it when they're like, America came in with Victoria Nuland and what have you, and did a coup against Yanukovych because they were, I don't know, where Ukraine wasn't corrupt enough or something. Like there is no logic to it, but I wonder what, your knowledge of that history or your take on their selling point about why the Ukrainians deserved this attack by Russia ultimately.
Well, I think that it ultimately, I wouldn't even, their argument of the whole Nuland, Yanukovych ousting, all that, I think that's it's just really an excuse they use. Because I really think Vladimir Putin, for those who don't know, when he was a young KGB agent back in Russia, he grew up, he was in the military under Stalin, under arguably one of the greatest dictators in history, right? Stalin was a terrible guy, did a lot of awful things, but he was good at getting what he wanted militaristically. He built the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin idolized Stalin. And from a very young age, Vladimir Putin wanted to recreate what he thought Stalin did right, which was the Soviet Union. So all of these, in my opinion, all of these things, from blaming the United States with Yanukovych to blaming NATO for building up on the border, all of these things I think are just excuses that Putin uses to justify his own personal belief that the Soviet Union should be rebuilt to what it was. Granted, the Soviet Union didn't last that long. It fell because of internal strife and a number of other reasons. And I think that Putin's ultimate goal was to just rebuild to what it once was. And he's just using all of these other instances to kind of explain away his ultimate goal.
You have a book you wrote, right, called Trump First, right? Is that, yeah, and it's sort of your experience of the few times you were around your dad and Trump at the same time, or you saw those kind of inner workings, or I suppose things about your, that your dad either confided in you or you were dealing with his experience, certainly after he was sort of cut loose and thrown under the bus. Tell us a little bit about that, and people can pick that up. It's a pretty quick, brisk read. It's not a huge book, but it gets right to the point. Right. But tell us a little bit about, some of the highlights of that, and that let people know what's in it so they can go get it and see that kind of firsthand knowledge. Because calling it Trump First was this idea of, I guess, a pushback against America First, and this illusion that that's what they've been selling, but also the sort of cult-like nature of the people around him. Yes?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I definitely wanted it to be a play on America First, but also because all of these quote-unquote America First policies were actually designed to be Trump First. They were designed to help his political aspirations first and foremost before helping America. And I wrote it. It was a pet project, took 3 weeks. I took the bar exam, and then I wrote it to get it out before the November election back in 2020. Right. And I just wanted to get it out just so folks were more educated about who they were voting for at the ballot box. Right. And I write a lot about how, because I don't shy away from the fact that I grew up in a Republican household or had Republican ideals. I don't shy away from that. I really lean into the fact that the Republican Party that we thought was the party of Romney, the party of McCain, is no longer the party that it used to be. And I also think that a lot of folks who think that they are Republicans, especially young people who think they are Republicans, don't actually know what the Republican Party stands for. So that's why I kind of wrote that. And through the book, I really highlight the fact that what Trump was saying publicly was very different from what was happening privately. Behind the scenes, he was really running these kind of shadow diplomacy campaigns using these rogue actors, whether it be just regular American citizens, whether it be Giuliani. I mean, these weren't government officials with security clearances by any means. Right. These were just your average donor to a campaign. So he was running these shadow diplomacy campaigns, whether it be in Venezuela, in Ukraine, or elsewhere. And I think that's just kind of how it really just showed how the administration was run and how poorly it was run. The so-called deep state, in my opinion, that Trump really railed against existed, but it wasn't the deep state with career government officials. It was the deep state made up of individuals that Donald Trump brought into his orbit that weren't in government, that should have been in government, that didn't have security clearances when they should have. And you see that now. I mean, almost 4 years later, 3 years later, you have Trump now under indictment for sharing or for taking classified materials. In the indictment, it says that Trump even shared classified materials about an Iran attack with a campaign aide. I mean, it's just so careless to have run these kind of shadow diplomacy campaigns with these individuals. So I really highlight that and just really wanted folks to know why it's so important to elect President Biden in 2020. Now, the book is a little outdated. It's 3 years old. You don't have to go pick it up. I'm happy to share anything in it. And I actually don't even really sell it anymore because it was really strictly meant for 2020. Right.
Sure.
And now we've moved on, and thankfully Trump is not in office, but
he's running to do it again. And I will say one of the values of it is that there are a few stories about Trump that I think, because they get buried under the more awful aspects of his character and his personality, that you kind of almost forget about. Like, he was fined $2 million for lying about his charity work, and he had to pay these charities money that he had said he had paid, and was basically using it as a tax write-off and taking the money that he was gathering for charity that he never passed on to the actual charities through his foundation, and using it to patch the roof at Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster and buy
Right.
paintings of himself. And that's just awful. That's just, that in and of itself shows such a lack of character. It's so fundamentally disgusting and bizarre, but it doesn't even match up with the pussy grabbing tape and the other stuff that he brings. Like he has so much other awful to choose from. People forget about that. And so I think there is a value to having a book like yours as a reference, even though, the 2020 election has passed. It's still indicative of how he would run things and how he would choose to run things. He hasn't learned a lesson. He isn't fundamentally going to run the office differently. It's not like he even says now I know who the good people in DC are, now I don't, even though he was lying about I know all the best people to get into office, and 4 years there he couldn't figure out anybody. It's not like, the people he's talking about are, I guess, people who are worse than Bill Barr and the like. Now, or Rudy Giuliani.
It's scary to think about.
It's absurd. So I do think there's value in having it. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to pick it up for specifically that reason, my dear friend. There's a reason why I use up as many of those tab arrows that the Post-its put out as I do, because my books look awful sometimes. Because on this show, we go back. We look back at this stuff and remind people of those things. And it's got value because, again, he's not going to change. That goes to something like, I think the first time I was introduced to your dad was in the video of Rudy Giuliani in some hotel somewhere with your dad and Igor and
It was
him.
the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C.
Right. And he says something like, mush it, baby, or something, whoever. And I remember, because it was Rudy Giuliani, be creeped out. And I'm like, dear God, please don't let it be a 16-year-old girl that they met someplace. Moishe, please be someone else. I don't know who this person is. They don't say. And it's just making my skin
I can
crawl.
guarantee you it wasn't a 16-year-old
God.
girl or anything. Don't worry about that.
Thank you. Because I just get, Rudy on his own, that's interesting. Now, we have questions. Look at the Borat movie, and you can see that's not out of the realm of possibility. But I will say that you're a recent law graduate. You graduated in 2020 from George Washington. Everybody in the chat, by the way, is saying you hope to run for office at some point. I hope so. You're a smart guy with a good soul, so that would be a good thing. We need more of that, if you so choose to do that. What did you see around this that, like the safeguards working, that frustrated Trump and perhaps even your dad at that time when he was kind of in that camp? He was under the spell or was working with it, that check and balance that actually worked, or that needs to be shored up. And these guys were able to, in this shadow government idea, they were able to work around that. If you have an example like the Venezuelan thing or something along those lines, or something.
Honestly, I don't. And the only reason why I want to be hesitant here is because I wasn't I experienced a few things which I wrote in the book and I've talked about private or previously, but I really wasn't involved in all of that.
I know.
During the time I was a law student. I graduated in 2020, well after all of the events occurred, and my primary focus there was really just getting through my last year of law school.
Sure.
And somehow, some way was stuck in some of these meetings and didn't even realize what they were until after the fact. So I do think, though, I will say that the checks and balances in government do work. And I will say, because, for example, the whole shadow diplomacy campaign in Ukraine, and you're seeing it with Giuliani submitted all of this quote unquote evidence to the Department of Justice of how there is what is it called? Impeachment evidence and corruption evidence of the Bidens in Ukraine. That went nowhere because that evidence was fake. As we now know, that evidence was, from what I read, I think was actually given to Giuliani from Russian agents.
Yes.
Or folks who are paid through subsidiaries and stuff. And that right there is an example of government working the way it's supposed to, the checks and balances. So everything that they were doing in 2019, 2020, trying to gather all this information, all the information turned out to be completely nonsensical because it was fake,
Yeah.
and it never got anywhere. And now it's crazy. You see how Republicans in Congress are trying to drudge up this information that Bill Barr and Trump's own Department of Justice said, "Hey, keep this away from us because it's
Right.
fake."
Yeah.
So it's kind of a full circle moment in a way.
Yeah, the and this is happening in real time as I cover clips in my afternoon show about this all the time, where you have a bunch of frustrated right wingers and Trump supporters, and both in and around the Comers of the world, who are like, let's get this information, or even the IRS whistleblowers who are trying to bring in evidence allegedly from the laptop, which, again, I will say for the record, Rudy Giuliani purchased in Ukraine from Russian agents. The blind repair shop story is a total fabrication. We can break that down at another time. I've done it many times. But the point is that information, because it's on the web and there's no metadata and you can't source it, and the person who wrote it and the other people who wrote it, no one is saying, yes, that's my real email, and nor would they. Anything that comes from that, fruit of the poison tree, will get thrown out. And these IRS agents were trying to incorporate stuff. Why don't we write in the thing about the big guy? Why don't we mention this in our report? And their senior, who they're saying now is trying to run interference, Weiss, was actually saying, no, if we bring this in, the whole case goes away. This stuff is garbage. It won't help us. Any normal court, this will get thrown out. And it seems like there's some Republicans that have a memory of what you're exactly talking about from back then, about this stuff coming up in an impeachment inquiry, because it will just put egg on their face.
For sure.
Yeah. So you ended up in some of these meetings accidentally, or didn't realize they were meetings at the time. Were they just dinners, and is that what you're talking about? Where
Yeah, it was just like, my dad's in town, come have dinner with me at the hotel. And I would come to dinner, and it would turn into some kind of meeting or whatnot. It wasn't anything ever formalized. I'm telling you, if it was, I would have been the first to say, absolutely not. I'm not going. Like, keep me out.
Right? Yeah, I'm in law school right now.
Right.
I'm trying to have a career. I got to get out of here.
I'm staying yeah, exactly.
Right. Have you been back to Ukraine previous to the war?
I've never been.
In the recent? You've never been. Oh, okay.
I've never been.
Yeah.
I was actually planning on going after. Most law students, when they graduate, in between, after taking the bar exam, you go on a bar trip, your 2-month, 3-month trip or whatnot.
Sure.
And Ukraine was going to be one of the countries I was going to go to. And then COVID hit, and then the war started. So there hasn't been really a time for me to get there, but hopefully in the next year or two, I'll be able to head over there.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. If you need someplace to stay, we've got some folks over there that'll hook you up. I'm sure you have relatives, but we'll get you through the safe spots anyways. That said, when you're watching this all play out, and again, you say, and this is, I'm curious about this too. Is it like, you grew up in a Republican household? You would say you had, at that time, conservative kind of party of Romney, party of McCain values that were sort of intrinsic to the household, and that your dad, I guess, and your mom, the whole household fed into. And would you say you picked up those yourself, and that they kind of inform how you are to some degree, just in your voting pattern these days? I'm just curious.
No. My actual, I guess, political transition was a little different in that I grew up in this household, but it wasn't until I really went away to college, or really to law school, that I realized, because I also went to law school young. I started law school when I was 18. So the first time I left the house was to go to law school. Mm-hmm. And when I was in law school, speaking with professors,
all right, you're a genius. We know, we get it. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyways, but when I was in law school, I really realized that the beliefs that I had were not beliefs that the Republican Party supported. For example, I believe that healthcare is a right? That every individual should have access to affordable healthcare. Sure. The Republican Party doesn't believe that. I growing up, I believed that public education is a right, that every individual should have a right to good quality education, no matter where they grew up in, and no matter what household they grew up in. The Republican Party does not believe that fundamentally. From abortion issues to gun reform, I mean, a lot of these social issues that I thought were Republican ideals, just because that is what the household believed. And if my household was supporting Romney, then I assumed Romney believed those too. I just wasn't educated enough until I really went out on my own when I was 18, 19 years old, and really realized that the entire time I was actually a Democrat. and I should vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
So during the 2020 election was my first time ever voting in a presidential election. Voted Democrat up and down the ballot, and then have really voted blue ever since, because I have been a Democrat my entire life, even though I grew up claiming I was a Republican in a Republican household.
Right.
Because I just wasn't educated enough on the issues.
I have often said that you can have an entire conversation from legit liberal to legit conservative as far as economic issues, social issues, what have you, entirely within the Democratic Party. We have a range of belief systems, and the idea is consensus, because these folks represent the populace around them. The populace may not be all in on everything you might expect, and you might have to sort of coax some people, explain to some people, introduce a program to people in such a way that they can absorb it. My mom famously worked for home health in Kentucky, signed people up for Kentucky Connect, which is the Obamacare system. And no one would sign up for Obamacare, but they would sign up for Kentucky Connect, not realizing that they were signing up for Obamacare. But that's if that made them sign up and they had health care, fine. We don't need to talk them into this. So yes, I believe the entire stretch of legitimate political thought, whatever that is, all fits within the Democratic Party as it has existed for decades.
For sure.
The Republican Party, in trying, unfortunately, since it seems like their entire identity is based on not being Democrats, has to be just off the rails, because they can't be normal conservative, because there are normal conservatives arguably in the Democratic Party. They can't be, libertarian-esque, liberal-leaning people who believe, in good use of government money for specific laser-pointed versions of that whole spectrum. They can't be that, because that exists in the Democratic Party. So the only option is be basically a flat earther, to QAnon your way around things. And it's sad to see, because it'd be nice to have a legitimate sounding board, I think, outside, so nobody lives in a bubble and we don't breed that. But you've seen that happen, and that, again, that's that Trump First title of your book, which really does point to that.
For sure.
Yeah. So you've unfortunately met Rudy Giuliani, I assume?
Multiple times.
Point? Oy, very sorry. But I just wanted to tell you on behalf of my entire chat, if you need anything, just blink twice. That's awful. Now I remember, I have a lot of the same kind of abstract history with Rudy Giuliani, which is, I always thought he was kind of creepy and full of crap, and running as a Republican, he was kind of weird. But when 9/11 happened, the theory was that he stood up and he became America's mayor. Then you find out that he moved the emergency, like the anti-terrorism emergency center, into the Twin Towers after the first bombing, and you're like, okay, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I don't think this is good. So how in the world did you find yourself, and your dad find himself, in the orbit of Rudy Giuliani, of all people?
Oh, well, I'll let my dad speak for himself.
Sure.
But
Right.
as far as me, it was just in these meetings and heading over to the hotel. I mean, Rudy held court in the Trump hotel lobby for most of the 4 years that Trump was in office. I mean, he would have his own little plaque. It would be his little office in the BLT Prime restaurant on the first floor, and he would hold court. I mean, literally anyone, from someone he was meeting to a hotel staff member to just fans of Trump, could come up to him, take pictures, talk to him. I mean, it was a pretty surreal scene, and that would happen almost every day that he was in DC.
So it's like Goofy at Disneyland.
He
He had a station, and you go there.
it was definitely an interesting experience.
Yeah, this is the OPO. This is the old post office. Is that what you're talking
That's
about?
correct.
The Trump Hotel there.
Yes.
All right. So the other thing is you make you're on TikTok, I believe, right? Which I warn people against. Move to Reels and Shorts, please, because it's about to shut down. But also, do you have a YouTube channel that we can pitch and let people know exists as well, or any of that stuff?
No, not yet.
All right, we'll get you there. Because the messaging of it, again, is important. But what you're focused on these days on your social media and the statements that you're making, what are would you say the two big stories, the two big cause celebs for you that you focus on or that you think aren't getting enough attention right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even characterize it as two things. I think the
Mhm.
biggest thing for me is really youth activism and just the right to vote. I what
Yeah.
I really, and I don't care if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. I think
Right.
everyone who is under the age of 18 needs to be educated about what it means to vote. They need
Hmm.
to be educated about why it's important to register to vote and why it's important to get out to the polls.
Yep.
And in a lot of states, like for example in Florida, individuals can register, can pre-register to vote as young as the age of 15. When you get your
Hmm.
permit, you can pre-register to vote as a whatever Republican, Democrat, whoever you want to be. A lot of people don't do that. And when they
Right.
turn 18, they just forget to register to vote. They never get out to the polls. If you really want to make change, if you really want to have a voice, you have
Yep.
to get out to the polls. So that's my biggest thing right now is just getting young people, especially Gen Z, to the polls.
Right.
And I say I don't really care if you're Republican, Independent, Democrat because the majority of Gen Z is a Democrat.
Right.
They're Democrats and they will vote
Right.
for Democrats. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. I just want young people to have a seat at the table, to be more politically involved, and
Mhm.
even for folks living in Washington D.C., for example, where 97% of residents will vote blue,
Mhm.
your voice still matters. There are still
Yeah.
elections outside of a presidential election, outside of a congressional election. You have local elections, city council elections. The president doesn't fix your roads or your sidewalks. That's your city council member, right?
Mhm.
Like, president doesn't take out the trash. That's your city council.
Mhm.
So just like educating folks and spreading civics awareness is probably my biggest issue right now.
Great. Yeah, I talk about this all the time, and that's why we're so welcoming to trolls in my chat, is because I want people to know that I would rather people argue in the political sphere and settle their differences in the political sphere than what the fallback is, which is what humanity has had until democracy showed up, which is just might makes right or abject violence or
Right.
the enforcement of violence. And when people give up on the belief in voting, oftentimes that's what they fall back into. You could argue that Jan 6 isn't so much about them thinking the election was stolen, but that they thought, oh, this country's moving away from what I think it should be, and therefore I'm going to take my country back to, my control point. The reality is, and those folks, a lot of the Jan 6ers didn't vote. A lot of them, I
Hmm.
mean, some of them voted twice, but a good portion of them didn't vote. And when people give up on that part of it, their other options aren't good. And so one of the ways I think, obviously, Gen Z has a more, like peace and openness attitude, as all generations seem to move forward. There's obviously this Ben Shapiro slice of them that exists, but the reality is it's not just lip service. I think to say I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or whatever, just as long as you vote. Because your belief in that system ultimately, I believe, because the idea is, like you said, you were always a Democrat, even when you thought you were a Republican, because of what you believed in, will eventually lead you to that. It will just lead you to voting for the more functional Democrat that will get what you need, the actual one that will
Hmm.
be able to do the job or do it well or do it without, with less corruption than you've had previously or what have you, move the ball down the field in
I
terms of the
agree.
best version of democracy, right? Because
I agree.
again, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I think that it's very easy. I mean, a lot of folks forget that, like in the United States, we have the fringe left, we have the fringe right. There are fringe folks in both parties, but
Yeah,
overwhelming majority, 90% of Americans believe in in compromise in similar
yeah,
things, whether it's on gun reform. 97% of Americans, even Fox News admits, believes in some
yep,
type of gun reform. Right
right,
there, we agree on so much more than we disagree. And
yeah,
when we allow the fringe left and the fringe right to have a voice, to have the loudest voice in the room,
to
really,
dictate
uh, to
the
dictate what
circumstance. Yes.
happens, that's what leads to gridlock in Washington. That's what
Right.
leads to young people being disenfranchised and saying, we don't really want to vote anymore. Because we see what's happening in DC when you say 97% of Americans believe in gun reform, 100% of Republicans in Congress do not.
Hmm.
And that's a problem.
Well,
So,
the interesting thing is, I would argue that probably 40 to 60% of them actually do, but they can't get reelected, or
well,
or
that's
they'll
you.
be primaried. And again, that's the fringe dictating the political conversation.
Yep.
If they vote against it, if they don't get an A from the NRA, then they are out.
Right.
And that's a problem in a democracy when somebody can't. The irony, I think, and you probably have seen this. that around the infrastructure bill or any of these other things. There's a ton of bipartisan normalcy going on. Lots of committee work that doesn't make it onto television, doesn't show up in the clip shows and that kind of stuff, which is always operating. And people take that part of it for granted. That's what you're voting for. That's what your vote, the impact of your vote is mostly the
Yeah.
functional parts that even the fringe can't impact on. Even the Marjorie Taylor Greens can't stop those committee hearings, can't stop them from
Right.
just marking up bills. They're going to try again to, not like close down the government in another month, but that won't go anywhere. That's just lip service too. So I always put up, especially around the election cycle, vote.org, because that helps people find out where they can register, what the rules are, all that kind of stuff. Is there an organization that you prefer or you punt people to that helps to do that?
No, I mean, I think that's great. I also
Mhm.
think, I mean, if like, for example, if you're more on the liberal side, like an organization like Voters of Tomorrow, they're doing great work organizing folks on the ground in a number of states, battleground
Right.
states. So following them and checking out their work and getting involved. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, and it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. You can get
Mhm.
involved with these youth organizations. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we every cycle of my life, and as a Gen Xer, we often talk to the other Gen Xers in our chat room that the world has been ending my entire life. So on a pretty regular schedule, that we're doomed, and yet Gen Xers have a pretty darn good record voting. Have for a long time. There was a lock in. Probably Rock the Vote had the biggest uh, impact on our generation and drove that forward, and kind of even when they stopped that, or had less of it or wasn't quite as visible, it still, I think, plays a part in the consistency of the vote, even if your politics have changed over the years and it changes who you would vote for, or the you know how utopian your belief is and what's possible in politics in general anyways, or that, but you do indeed vote. um the youth vote doesn't stay the youth vote is kind of my point. And it's consistency that drives a mandate. And when people give up, either they don't in the first place because they don't think anything will change, or they vote once or twice and then they're disillusioned because something that should take 10 to 20 years didn't happen in 2 to 4, and they're kind of given this false hope and they get frustrated about it. What do you see as the remedy to get people to lock into the idea? And I guess it's the educating them and getting them to sign up early, and I think that is fantastic, to get people to recognize that your choice on voting is a project of citizenry for the rest of your life, as opposed to, all right, I'll do it this time, but only if, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and I think it's not just educating folks in school, but also I think encouraging folks to get involved in the political process outside of school. I think that individuals who volunteer for campaigns during
Mm-hmm.
school are oftentimes the same individuals who will vote consistently for the rest of their lives
Right.
after school,
Yeah.
whether in volunteer positions, paid positions, whatever it is. I think that's really important. I mean, setting all that aside, I think that alternative media sources are also very important in this aspect, because I think the legacy media, the way they frame elections and these issues right now is very hyperbolic. They focus on the one or two big issues that the fringe left and fringe right scream about every single day. They don't focus on the hundreds of bills that are passed and signed by the
Right.
president every single year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that going to better media sources, uplifting better media sources that will educate folks on not just a President Joe Biden impeachment scandal, but rather on the fact that literally in these spending bills that you're reducing the cost of prescription drugs, that you're allowing Medicare to
Right.
negotiate the cost of certain prescription drugs, that benefits Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It benefits everyone. So media does not do a good enough job right now, in my opinion.
Right.
So really
Gotcha.
changing that will be
Boston Brian
important.
wants to know what your definition of the fringe left is, and I guess that's, I suppose, the fringe right applies to. I think I know largely, for me anyways, it's the edges of like Jimmy Dore and TYT, and the idea that if we don't get everything, nobody gets anything. Full on, we're gonna tear down the entire economy and restart it, and we're actually like without Marxism, everyone will die and the whole thing is racist. You need to start from scratch. That would be the left version. The right is we don't need a government at all, so we need to tear it all down and start from scratch and go back to Wild West. Whoever has the most shots left in their gun is actually the person who runs the town. If you boil it down, that's where they're going. That's what Alex Jones thinks the world will be like, if the government just ceased to exist. What's your kind of version of what the big fringe messages, besides obviously the Hunter Biden impeachment stuff?
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
when I say fringe left and fringe right, I don't necessarily mean, I don't want to categorize an individual to represent both movements. Rather, I really talk about it issue specific, right? So,
Sure.
for example, I would say, or a good example of the fringe left, because that was the question, is, in my opinion, Cornel West right now in the Green Party.
Right.
In this moment in time, our democracy really is on the line. And a vote for Cornel West, a vote for a third party in the form of a Green Party, is a vote for President Trump, in my opinion.
Right.
That's just, to me, is the fringe left nowadays. If you want to go issue specific, if you're talking about climate reform, the Green New Deal is very fringe left right now. The majority of the Democratic Party does not support the Green New Deal. Now, I support parts of the deal. I think parts need to be remedied, but that right now is considered fringe left, quote unquote. And on the same thing on the Republican side, abolishing all abortions with no exceptions from the moment of conception, that, in my opinion, is fringe right on the abortion angle. And on the left,
it doesn't fit in with the public.
Allowing third trimester abortions would be considered more fringe left, because the overwhelming majority of Democrats don't believe that at 40 weeks someone could have an abortion unless there's
an elective abortion
or something.
Right.
An elective abortion, correct.
Right.
So that's kind of what I mean.
Yep. And it's interesting in terms of the Green Party aspect. You can argue that Nader was the point shave that gave Bush the White House in 2000. You could argue that Ted Kennedy primarying Jimmy Carter shaved points enough for Reagan and undermined the Democratic position at a time when there were already so many headwinds against it. And you've got somebody like Jimmy Carter, by the way, who created more jobs in his term, even against an OPEC oil embargo, which was meant to destroy the economy of the United States. It was an active measure, economic attack on the United States and our European allies, but specifically the United States as the big dragon or what have you. That all the things that he was doing, even in spite of that, created more jobs than Donald Trump did, put solar panels on the White House roof that, had they stayed on for the next decade, would have encouraged the advancements in solar panel design that we're now seeing have happened in the last 8 years, would have happened in 8 years' time, because the material physics of it has not changed. It wasn't like it was about computing power or microchips that made this possible. It was about synthesis. They would have gone through that level of change and advancement in the 80s. Can you imagine where solar panels would be right now and their efficiency if that had happened decades ago, right? This is just a reality. And this is largely because people were like, I don't know. And by the way, some folks are bristling at the idea that the Green New Deal isn't far left. The Green New Deal isn't actually a piece of legislation. It is a statement of purpose in terms of what AOC put out earlier on.
So
and
when I meant, what I meant by the Green New Deal, I meant by the piece of legislation that was introduced that is only co-sponsored by a very small subset of the Democratic Party nowadays. The majority of the Democratic Party has not co-sponsored that piece of legislation because it is more fringe. And that's what I mean by fringe left.
And inherently because it involves like a direct cutoff of fossil fuels at a certain point, which would be tantamount to murdering a couple of 100 million people on Earth, because that's what will happen. You have to phase these things out. Hence why we have net zero, which is another thing. Like, if you talk about fringe right, the Republicans don't grasp that net zero is not zero.
Right.
It is one for one. As much carbon as we are putting in, we are taking out, or we are mitigating at the same time, so that we get this stasis point by a certain point, and then we can start lowering it because of efficiency, just like we have with pollutants in the air with cars when we start putting, mufflers and catalytic converters and all that kind of stuff on them to keep them from choking fumes into the air. They can grasp that. They'll call net zero zero. Like, on this date, there's a dictate from the Biden administration that nobody can have an engine that pull starts ever again on Earth, or they'll get nuked by the FBI or the ATF or something. It's absurd. The that, and again, that goes to that in the reality of incrementalism, which is what the fringe of both sides usually bristles against the most, because they want sort of a dictatorial solution, is also the challenge of getting youth voters involved, because incrementalism is not that interesting to new people. If you've been around long enough, or you have a child or a business, or you've achieved a degree like you have, you get the power of incrementalism. You get that, if you want to get up there, you're going to either climb or use a ladder, but it goes step by step, and every step matters. Whereas, magic thinking, which I would argue is bringing down Trump world right now, also impacted the 2016 race around the Bernie versus Hillary fight and that instance. So how do you get people? I mean, maybe again, a deeper question than just getting them involved. You're talking about how you can register to vote so that when you turn 18 in Florida, for example, at 15 years old, when you get your learner's permit at the DMV, a lot of these DMV states, if you can, motor voter bills allow for that in a lot of states. California, I think, is another one. So what's the class besides just straight up civics?
I mean, that is the class.
Right.
And there should be civics in and civics shouldn't just start in high school. Civics should start in 5th grade and 4th grade and 3rd grade. I mean, learning about the branches of government, learning what I think exactly
That's
what
Schoolhouse Rock
was
patching that hole in the 70s, because it was cartoons for kids that were, these were little kids this was aimed at. It was a sing-along song to make you understand these things.
Right, and the same thing on the science side with Bill Nye, right? We use those types of tools to educate extremely young individuals. And I say that education is the biggest key here, because the federal government was created to have gridlock. The federal government was not created to go for these all or nothing approaches. These all or nothing approaches to policy are better done in your state governments, in your local governments, where you could actually effectuate change a lot faster. The federal government does not regulate 99.9% of the things that impact you or I on a daily basis. What's happening in Florida or New York or California, the way the federalism works as a whole, it gives these states the power to regulate aspects within them. And so, you have a lot stricter climate regulations in California, whereas in Florida, it's a free-for-all for anyone who wants, or in Texas, it's a free-for-all to get as much oil as you want before the planet dies out. And I think that it is important that we educate people that if you want to make change, that you don't just focus on the president. You don't just focus on what's happening in DC. You focus on what's happening in your own communities, your state rep, your state senator, your mayor, because they're the ones that are going to really impact day-to-day change.
They'll dictate where the federal dollars that are allocated go specifically, whether they do what they're supposed to do, or whether they get diverted into some side project that has nothing to do with the will of the voters. You're absolutely right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And when people don't really realize, I mean, California is like one of the top 10 largest economies in the entire world.
Yeah.
So it's a larger economy than most countries out there. It has more people than most countries. It affects the climate. The state of California affects climate more than most countries around the world. So the fact that in California, Governor Newsom is imposing these stricter climate regulations, that is doing more than anything in DC. That he is doing more than the IRA will do over the next 5 years. That's just the fact of the matter, because he is able to impact a lot more lives just based on being a state.
There's a directness to it. I think, especially in terms of zoning in cities, major cities, when you're dealing with pollution and the like, or efficiency of transport, or rail funding, those kind of things, and even again, public education. When you do it on a city scale level, at a city council or at a mayor level, it is an incubator for possible future change. That's where the testing goes. That's where you can see if your political ideas actually work. on a scale if
Mhm.
but even your idea would get watered down on the state or on the federal level because it's so enormous. I have argued that one of our best ways to get to a version of single payer or universal health care for American citizens is not a single federal system, since you could argue that again California's economy is nearly as bigger than the UK's. That if each state created their own internal single payer system, and via the Commerce Clause, you could buy into it. The states that provided the best services for their citizenry and the profits themselves were either kept low, but what profits there were generated benefited the state in terms of infrastructure, education spending, the kind of stuff that we always get a promise that lottery spending will do. An insurance system like that does gain money that isn't spent out, that money going to help the state, it has no particular downside. And if you don't like it, you can move to another state single payer system like Massachusetts or Washington state, where you get the same kind of service. The profits are put back into the community, back into the state itself. And you have an option. If the federal system, like Social Security or Medicare, Medicaid, which are invaluable, ever come under the control of the Republican Party, they will cut the Achilles tendon of them as quickly as they possibly can, and then claim that they can't run. And that's the problem I have with a universal healthcare system in the United States, insofar as, even run-of-the-mill Republicans like Mitt Romney or somebody who had it in his state, but we would be against it on a federal level, might capsize the system the way they attacked Obamacare. But they could not do it in states, and it's really hard for red states, if you'll notice, around Medicare expansion and some other stuff, that if it's working for the citizenry of another state and it's making business more viable because they don't have to worry about insurance costs or what have you, and businesses leave their state to go there, they have a monetary imperative, whether they believe in the moral aspect of it or not, to do that in their own state, to run a functional system that does draw people, that does compete on a market interstate, amongst other areas. And they can obviously, small states like Wyoming probably wouldn't. Texas absolutely could. And to be able to buy into one of these systems, no single system could undermine it all. No one president or Rand Paul in the Senate could destroy it if you do it that way. And it's got more resiliency, like you're saying, about the direct impact, because in Louisiana, the cancer clusters have a lot to do with chemical problems. And so you've got to, if they run their own healthcare system or they start developing it, how do they fight back against what's killing and sickening their own citizens? It's costing the constituents money. They start addressing the environmental concerns there in a way that the federal government has had to do on their behalf, because they don't seem to give a shit. So, but this is an incremental approach, no matter how that happens, and I believe, by the way, I view it as healthcare as a responsibility. That's my languaging on it, because I believe that we as a civil society have a responsibility to provide healthcare to people who cannot provide it for themselves, and that anybody who can take care of themselves does, either by having insurance and maintaining their health at the same time, right? You have a responsibility. Stay out of the hospital so that you don't take up a bed that might go to somebody else, to keep all of our costs lower. That's a responsibility to me. But we do have to take care of those that cannot afford it, that do not have the option, who are struck by a cancer cluster or an accident, something outside their realm of capability, right? And that's our responsibility as morally, ethically, as opposed to a right, which means that a doctor should work for me for free, essentially, whether they believe that I'm the cause of my own illness or not. And that's a different conversation. It's just a languaging difference that works for me.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I mean, I will just say this, that I 100% agree with the idea of Medicare for all and a single payer system that works well. I mean, if you could implement it in a country like the United States and it works well and it's efficient and effective, yes, you'd get it done. But we can't expand Medicaid to 700,000 Floridians right now. Do you really think we can pass Medicare for all in a Congress so divided? Absolutely not.
Right.
It's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream to pass any Medicare expansion, let alone Medicare for all. So let's talk about what we can actually do.
What we can accomplish.
Right. Not what we dream to do or aspire to do. Because I aspire to live in a country that everyone has access to free
Right.
and effective and efficient healthcare. That's just not the reality right now, and it won't be the reality for a while, unfortunately.
Right. And in doing that, moving towards that goal, there will be steps along the way that you must take to get there, both to make the populace feel they can trust a system like that. Like I said, as a Democrat, I don't trust that a Republican president who gets in there would intentionally be a good guardian of a national healthcare system, in the same way that you could argue the conservatives in the UK have done what they can do to undermine the NHS over the years to make it less serviceable, so they can gin up some sort of resentment in the populace and then eventually get rid of it. It's a long road to hoe for them, but they chip away at it, right? And I think there's no question that there are Republicans that once they got in, with the way they talk about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, the Mike Lee tape alone, I think is a warning to everybody that, if they get in there and they have access to a federal system, that's why, because we have a federalist system in the country, we have multiple states, using the Commerce Clause, setting up these systems where you could buy into Massachusetts system, or you could buy into California's, you could be in Washington's, you could buy into these bigger states across state lines from a smaller state. And if you don't like it or they don't service you well, you can purchase one from another. You can get it from another. You could have tax breaks in your state if they don't want to run their own, so that you can get it on your state taxes, so you can buy into another state. And the efficiency of them, and the availability of them, and the quality of the care that you can expect on that network would be a standard that states would fight to have, because of the actuarial table, and finance benefits of running a very efficient functioning system that people want to join. But right now you can't buy across those state lines. And that one thing would set a cascade of people who would be against a federal system buying into the systems that do exist now. But that's an incremental move, and I'm glad that you appreciate if we could just get the youngins to appreciate every rung in the ladder. To recognize you don't go to the gym just once, you don't eat healthy just once, you don't recycle just once, and it's done. There are certain things, like being a good citizen and voting and fighting, in quotes, for the things that you believe in, that are a lifelong process. And you dig in and enjoy that process. You can get all caught up in the back and forth, but enjoy the fact that it's, we're going to get there. It might take 20 years, but if you think it's worth it, just like raising an intelligent and worthwhile child, that's worth it. You put your time in, right? Being healthy physically, put your time in. We're at the tail end of the show. I want to, what's your website, or where can people go? I just want to make sure we have those.
Just check me out on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it.
Shitter, I call it. I pronounce it the same way Xi Jinping does. Shitter.
It's my first and last name.
Right.
My first and last
Aaron
name. And there you can find everything.
Okay, great. And then eventually we'll get you a YouTube channel and a bouncing URL that sends them to places, because your voice is very good and people appreciate your content. And we're in a more the merrier situation on our side of the aisle, right? We're, as Democrats who are proud of the actual progress being made, like the infrastructure bill, like the bills you're talking about, to get that information out. There just simply aren't enough outlets. So again, I wish you great expansion in what you're doing. And if you ever decide to run for office, I'm sure you've already got a campaign manager in my chat. So thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. See you again, hopefully. We'll
Awesome.
we'll check in with you along the line when some of these impeachment things come around, just to get your direct take on them as they happen, because it'll be a bit of fun, but also as these bills continue to pass. Because
I'll tell you some fun Rudy stories later.
Okay, it's a deal. All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
I'm fine. I'm all right. Okay. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. There he goes. Aaron Parnas, everybody. Thanks to Andrea for setting that up. Really appreciate it. And thanks to Texas Paul for coming on today. Yeah. And hopefully we're, there is an area where a rising tide lifts all boats. So we're getting people, And he was like, voters of tomorrow. I want to let me see if I can find the let's see, voters of tomorrow. Where is it? So probably yeah, there it is. .org. This is the organization he was talking about. I'm going to put this in the chat room so you guys can see it. Hold on. Bump. That's the other organization that, along with vote.org, which is, I think, crucial. And again, we're getting very close to the time, especially around the primaries, where we want to. Whoops, that was funny. Get out of here. Or I can type. Okay. There you go. So this right here is just super valuable. And I would like everybody, the vote.org link, super easy. That if you can, anytime you're talking politics somewhere and you just feel like throwing in a link and you don't have one that relates to what you're talking about, throw that one in there. Just have people have it. It's invaluable. And we want to share that one out as much as possible. There's every resource you would need to find, how to vote where you are, check your registration, register to vote, how you vote by mail, election reminders, when it's coming, your people taking pledges to register when they're younger. That ties into what he was talking about. You can send it to kids and younger people and go, hey, sign up on here. You go to pledge to register and you just sign this little thing and it'll let you know. They'll send you an email that says, hey, you can start registering now at this age. So I just think, yeah, it's difficult. We do need honey, not vinegar, to bring people to their cause. Sometimes I agree with you, though. Oh, I'm all honey. Come on now. I don't care what anybody says. I'm all honey. Honey child. Thank you, CSL, for pinning that in there. So share that out anytime you want for another link. And also, it's a good thing to just spam on the regular, because it will drive, it almost singularly drives Republicans crazy that there are resources that make it easier for people to vote. I miss you guys, but I have to say these topics are making me feel anxious. Yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. This is the process of doing this. Sugar bear, I'm going to make it all right. I got honey all over the place. Come on now. Don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. Don't feel anxious. Take a deep breath. That's right. We're good. There's no immediate danger whatsoever. We're just taking little steps. You know what I mean? It's just one more sit-up. That's what we're doing. We're just doing one more sit-up. Just one more. Just one more sit-up. Just one more. That's all you need. I'm not Sam Cedars' 10-year-old son caught COVID probably the first day of school in New York. Oh, that's a shame. Wish him well. Even though Sam apparently thinks I'm an asshole, which is fine, because I concur sometimes. I think he's probably the worst debater on our side that exists. I mean that literally. Of all of them, it's just terrible at it. It's terrible. I'll keep going. We're going to get Dems all supporting each other. I've been sharing your content. Oh, thanks, Robin. That's all it takes. Bit by bit. Hal's Elvis voice. Come on, I got to tell you something. We're all going to get through this. I don't want you to worry. Let's roll. So, Bootsy Collins. I'm not doing it again. Another Value Import show. Thank you so much, Anvil's Ghost. This is how we do it. Now I got to go practice my Aerosmith songs. I misspoke. I'm not doing Draw the Line. I'm doing Last Child. As opposed to that one. I'm doing Walk This Way, Last Child, Back in the Saddle, and Fine Fine. Which I'm very, so good. I'm excited about that. I'm just glad I got to talk them into doing one of the songs off Pump. So, because there's a tendency with Chuck and all those guys to go back to only 70s Aerosmith and that kind of stuff. Yes, I am doing a show tonight. Don't worry. I'm going to have a regular show tonight. I'll see you guys at my regular time. Don't worry about it. It'll be me. It'll be clips. There's a panic. I think at some point there's going to be there's a Trump rally. When is that? Tonight at 7. So Eastern time. Okay, so one of these fucking things is gonna show up right as a second hour of my show. It's gonna be a long one tonight. Buckle in. He's live at Monumental Leaders Rally. Okay, so maybe it's a short thing. Maybe he's on at that point and he doesn't have a full fucking drag on. We'll see. And boy, are they're I gotta say, it's hard to find new talking points from these dickheads. They're dredging up like this old shit, and it's not working. Oh, it's so good. It's just, we'll have some fun later on. Don't you worry about it. It's gonna be such a good time. It's just gonna be you, me, the Clips, hi Boston Brian, and the Kidney. Or so I hear. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe and that like on your way out. Just hit that subscribe and that like. I didn't do any of that stuff today, did I? I just didn't pitch it. I'm terrible at this. Terrible. I'm a terrible. I'm a naughty professional streamer. A naughty streamer.